I'm not asking for money, just the leftover food.
Marcus?
The Aurelia Club sat 22 floors above Michigan Avenue, all glass and gold light, the kind of room where nobody had ever gone a day without eating. Crystal chandeliers threw light across marble floors. A string quartet played near the windows overlooking Lake Michigan, and out on the terrace, the wind carried the smell of champagne and roasted chestnuts. 400 guests had paid $10,000 a plate for the Brooks Family Foundation Gala, and every one of them believed they were looking at a woman who had it all figured out. Naomi Brooks stood at the center of it in an emerald gown, smiling the smile she'd learned to produce on command. She was 41. She'd built a hospitality empire out of a single South Side diner, hotels in 6 cities, restaurants with 2-year wait lists, a private club. Powerful people begged to join. Forbes had put her on a cover. The mayor had shaken her hand twice that year, and still, standing in the middle of her own triumph, she felt like she was watching her life happen to somebody else. "You did it again," her husband Isaiah Brooks said, raising his glass to a passing senator. "Best gala yet." "Ask me after we see the receipts," Naomi said, and Isaiah laughed, half a second too late, the way he always laughed at her jokes now. 20 years of marriage had taught her exactly what that laugh meant. It meant he wasn't listening. It hadn't meant anything else in a long time. By 11, the guests were gone, the band was packing up, and Naomi sent the staff home so she could lock up herself. She liked the club best empty when she could hear herself think again. She was crossing the kitchen corridor when she heard voices by the employee entrance. "Sir, I need you to leave the property, now." She stopped. Through the service door, 2 of her guards had a man backed up, tall, broad-shouldered, a canvas jacket patched at the elbows, boots held together with duct tape. When he spoke, his voice was calm, almost gentle. "I'm not asking for money. I just want to know if the food's going in the dumpster. If it is, I'd like to take it. People are waiting on me." "This is private property," the taller guard snapped. "You need to go." "Dante." Naomi's voice cut the hallway before she'd decided to use it. The guard turned, startled. "Mrs. Brooks, sorry, we didn't want him bothering the last guests. There are no guests left." Naomi stepped into the light and for the first time looked straight at the man in the canvas jacket. He was already backing toward the door, head down. "Sorry for the trouble, Mom. I'll go." "Wait." She didn't know why she said it. Later, she'd tell herself it was the food. 6 trays of untouched salmon and prime rib, and people 3 miles away who hadn't eaten. That part was true. It wasn't the whole truth. The man paused, hand on the doorframe. That was when she saw it. A bracelet on his left wrist, braided leather, faded to the color of old coffee, one small carved wooden bead threaded through the center. Naomi's whole body went still. She had made that bracelet herself at 17, sitting on the back steps of a 2-flat, teaching herself to braid cord from a library book because she couldn't afford anything real. She remembered her fingers cramping. She remembered tying it on and telling him it would keep him safe even when she couldn't. She hadn't seen it in 23 years. "Marcus?" The man went rigid. Slowly, he lifted his head and looked at her. His eyes were the same, older, harder, more tired, but the same eyes that used to find hers across a cafeteria like nobody else existed. Naomi. Her name came out of him like it cost something. I didn't know this was your place. Neither guard moved. The last cello note still seemed to hang in the marble ceiling. Naomi Brooks, billionaire, philanthropist, wife of Isaiah Brooks, stood frozen in her own hallway, staring at Marcus Reed, the boy she'd loved before she knew what loss meant. Now, a man in a torn jacket asking a stranger's kitchen not to waste its food. 23 years. And in that one silent second, she understood something was already coming apart. Marcus didn't wait for her to say anything else. He took the 2 trays the kitchen staff nervously handed him, mumbled a thank you that seemed to cost him something, and walked out into the cold before Naomi found her voice. By the time she reached the door, he was 3 blocks gone, a shrinking shape under the streetlights, carrying a stranger's leftovers like treasure. Her driver asked if she was all right. She wasn't sure how to answer. The next morning ran the way every morning ran. A car at 6:15. Her assistant, Priya Patel, briefing her on the drive downtown, a board meeting, a ribbon cutting on Wacker Drive, lunch with 2 investors from Dallas, a call about a zoning dispute. Naomi made 40 decisions before noon and couldn't remember one of them an hour later. That night, she came home to a penthouse with lake views on 3 sides. Isaiah wasn't there. A note said he had an investor dinner and would be late. She ate alone at a table built for 12, listening to her own fork against the plate. She thought about Marcus. She wondered if he'd eaten. Across the city, in a hollowed-out warehouse off the old rail corridor, Marcus Reed was doing what he did every night. He'd carried the trays 6 blocks wrapped in a garbage bag against the wind, and now he stood over a folding table lit by 2 lanterns, portioning food onto paper plates for the 31 people who called the warehouse home. "Easy," Marcus said, laughing as a heavy-set man tried to grab 2 plates. "Otis, there's enough. I counted twice." "You always say that," Otis Grant grumbled, smiling anyway. Marcus knew all their names. Otis, who'd lost his job at the steel plant 3 years back. Ruthie Coleman, 71, who still talked to her late husband like he was in the room. A teenage boy named Dre Simmons, who'd aged out of foster care with nowhere to go. Marcus made sure the kids ate first, then the elderly, then everyone else. And only when every plate was full did he make one for himself. Tonight, there wasn't quite enough left. He ate a few bites of cold rice and called it plenty. "You didn't eat again," Ruthie said from her cot by the space heater. "I ate." "Marcus Reed, I raised 4 boys. I know a lie when I hear one." He smiled, tired but real, and sat on the crate beside her. What he didn't tell her was that he'd just seen Naomi Brooks for the first time in 23 years, and it had cracked something open in his chest he'd spent 2 decades holding shut. He'd read about her, of course. Everyone in Chicago had. He remembered once in a doctor's waiting room staring at her photo in a magazine for a long time, pride and grief tangled together, then folding it shut and never opening one again. He'd built something too, once. Reed Auto Restoration, a shop on Cicero Avenue he'd grown from a single lift into a business with 11 employees and a 2-month wait list. He remembered the smell of motor oil and fresh paint, the pride of handing a man his father's Mustang looking brand new. He used to think back then Naomi would have been proud of it if she'd ever come back to see it. She never had. In 18 months, it was all gone. The shop, the house, the savings, the name. He didn't like thinking about how. Some things were easier carried in silence. He looked around at 31 people asleep under blankets and cardboard and reminded himself the way he did every night. A man who's lost everything can still choose what kind of man he becomes. He'd chosen to be someone who fed people. It had to be enough. Miles away, Naomi lay awake beside a husband who hadn't touched her in months, staring at a ceiling she'd paid $80,000 to have painted, thinking about a boy with a leather bracelet who once promised he'd love her even when they were old and grey. She hadn't kept a single promise she made him. She wondered if it was too late to keep even one. It took Naomi 3 days to work up the nerve and one call to her head of security, Roland Hayes, to find the warehouse. "Not exactly a safe part of town, Mrs. Brooks," Roland said. "You sure you want to go yourself?" "I'm sure." She didn't tell Isaiah where she was going. She told herself it was because he was busy. On the drive, she sat in an unmarked SUV in jeans and a plain wool coat instead of anything with a label, and told herself a lot of things. The warehouse looked worse in daylight. Boarded windows, a rusted loading dock, graffiti climbing one wall like ivy. But smoke curled from a chimney pipe someone had rigged through the roof, laundry lines strung between beams. For a building that looked abandoned, it was clearly somebody's home. She found Marcus out back, unloading crates of donated bread from an old Buick that looked like it ran on faith alone. He froze. "Naomi, what are you doing here?" "I brought food." She waved Roland over with 2 coolers, sandwiches, fruit, water, enough for 50. "I didn't want it to just be party leftovers. I wanted it to be for you, for them." Marcus's jaw tightened. "I don't need your charity." "It's not charity, it's food." "Same thing, coming from a Brooks." The words came out sharper than he meant, and he winced at his own tone. "Sorry, that wasn't fair. You're allowed to be mad at me, Marcus." "I'm not mad." He set the last crate down harder than he needed to. "I don't know what you're doing here. 23 years and you show up with a cooler of sandwiches. You want to feel better about yourself?" The words landed exactly where he'd aimed them. "I saw your bracelet," Naomi said quietly. "I made that when I was 17. You still have it." His hand moved to cover his wrist, like she'd caught him at something private. For a long moment, he didn't answer. "Never took it off," he finally said. "Not when I got married, not when I got divorced, not when I lost everything. I don't know why. Habit, maybe. Or maybe I wasn't ready to let go of the one person who ever believed I'd amount to something. Marcus, you left." His voice cracked, and for a second, the tough exterior dropped completely. One day you were there. Next day, your whole family was gone. No goodbye, no letter. I waited by that phone for months. Used to walk past your old house just to look at the porch light. Naomi felt her eyes burn and let them. "My father lost his job, Marcus. We had 36 hours before the bank took the house. I wrote you a letter, mailed it the day we left." He went still. "I never got a letter." "I know that now. I found out years later. My mother pulled it from the mailbox before it left the block. She thought a long-distance thing would keep me tied to a life she was trying to get us out of. She told you I didn't want to hear from you. She never said it to your face, just through somebody else. The silence stretched long enough for a pigeon to land on the dock and fly off again. She lied to both of us, Marcus said, disbelief and grief moving across his face at once. Both of us. He turned, staring out at the empty lot, his shoulders rising and falling, with a breath that looked like it cost him everything he had. 23 years, I built a life thinking you chose to disappear. Got married trying to fill a hole I didn't understand. Didn't work. Lost the business partly because I never stopped trying to prove something to a ghost. I'm sorry. Don't be. That's not your fault or mine. He shook his head. But I've got 31 people in there who depend on me showing up steady every day, asking nothing of anybody I can't trust. I can't build that on somebody who might vanish again. I'm not 17 anymore. I'm not disappearing. We'll see. He picked up the last cooler and started for the door, then paused, glancing back. Thank you for the food, truly, but don't come back unless you mean it. He went inside. Naomi stood alone in the cold, staring at a building full of strangers and one man who'd loved her before either of them knew what love could cost. She meant it. She just didn't know yet how far she'd have to go to prove it. Naomi came back the next week, and the week after. By the fourth visit, Marcus had stopped pretending he wasn't glad to see the SUV pull up. She learned Ruthie took her coffee with 3 sugars, that Dre wanted to study engineering, that Otis had a daughter in Milwaukee he was too proud to call first. You could do more, she told him one evening, watching him staple a tarp over a hole in the roof, with real resources behind you. I do fine. You do fine for 31 people with a Buick and a prayer. My foundation needs a director of community outreach, somebody who actually knows what people need, not a consultant with a degree who's never slept in a warehouse in January. I want that person to be you. Marcus laughed, disbelieving. You want to give the homeless guy from the alley a corner office. I want to hire the most capable person I've met in years for a job he's already been doing with no budget for 2 years. He turned her down 3 separate times over the next 2 weeks. Didn't want to owe her, didn't trust how it would look, and the last time he'd trusted a business partner with his future, it had cost him everything. It was Ruthie who changed his mind. You've been carrying that card in your pocket 2 weeks, she said, catching him staring at it. You got more compassion than sense, and I love you for it, but compassion doesn't buy Dre a winter coat. That woman's offering you 100 times the reach you've got now, and you're too scared to take it because your pride got broken once. That's not... It is. Her voice softened. Taking help isn't giving up something, baby. It's deciding what you build with it. Take the job. Prove that man who stole from you was wrong about who you are. Marcus called Naomi the next morning. I'll take it. On one condition, I hire my own team, I choose the first programs, and the first thing we build is real housing for the people already in that warehouse. Not a shelter. A home. Done, Naomi said, smiling before she realized it. Welcome to the foundation, Marcus. That night, alone, the memories she'd been outrunning for 3 days caught up with her all at once. She was 17 again, sitting on the hood of Marcus's first car, a beat-up Chevy Cavalier he'd bought with garage money. July. The south side smelled like cut grass and charcoal. Marcus was talking about the engine he'd just rebuilt like it was the most fascinating thing in the world, and she believed him because when Marcus talked about anything, he made you believe it mattered. One day, he said, grease still under his nails, "I'm going to own the biggest restoration shop in Chicago. Real classics. People'll drive 3 states just to have me touch their engine. And I'm going to own hotels," she'd said, half joking. "Real ones, with your name on the awning." "Brooks and Reed," he grinned. "We'll take this whole city." She remembered him walking her home every day, 40 minutes, never once complaining, even in a Chicago winter. She remembered him showing up outside her window with a dying boombox, playing a song badly out of tune, and her laughing so hard she cried while he beamed like he'd won something. She remembered the bracelet, 2 weeks of teaching herself from a library book because she couldn't afford the watch he'd been eyeing in a pawn shop window, his face when she tied it on his 18th birthday. "Nobody's ever made me anything before." It was probably true. Then 36 hours. That was all the warning before the bank took the house and they were gone. Milwaukee, then Atlanta, chasing whatever work her father could find. She'd written the letter in the back of a moving truck, crying, promising him this wasn't the end of them. She hadn't known until 3 days ago that her mother had pulled it from the mailbox, or that she'd told a heartbroken 18-year-old, never to his face, only through a friend, that Naomi didn't want to be found. Her mother had died 6 years ago without ever mentioning it. Across the city, Marcus lay on his cot, fighting the same flood. He remembered opening day at Reed Auto Restoration. A single hydraulic lift bought on credit, a business plan written on a diner placemat. His first real client, an old man who cried seeing his late wife's '67 Mustang, the exact shade of blue she'd chosen on their wedding day. 11 employees who counted on him, the quiet pride of being a man people could rely on. He remembered Calvin Price. Calvin had shown up at exactly the wrong moment, 2 years in, right when Marcus needed capital to expand. Money, connections, a smile that never once felt unsafe, which in hindsight was the most dangerous thing about him. 50-50 partners on paper. Except the paper Calvin actually filed said Calvin owned 80%, under a signature close enough to Marcus's own that it took years to even understand what had happened. By the time Marcus realized the accounts were drained and the equipment liquidated through a shell company, the shop no longer legally belonged to him. A lawyer he could afford for 11 months told him fighting the forgery in court would cost 6 figures, money Calvin had already taken. Marcus lost the shop, then the house that secured a loan he no longer controlled, then his marriage, which hadn't survived watching a good man crumble under weight that wasn't his. He remembered signing bankruptcy papers at a folding table, thinking Naomi Brooks was out there somewhere, happy, married, and had never once thought of him again. He'd been wrong. He just didn't know it yet. What neither of them knew that night was that Calvin Price hadn't stopped after Reed Auto Restoration. He'd simply moved on to bigger marks, building a quiet empire of stolen companies behind a respectable face and a downtown office. And Calvin had just started paying very close attention to the news that a certain homeless man was suddenly being seen with Naomi Brooks. He did not like it. Isaiah Brooks noticed the change in his wife before she said a word about Marcus Reed. Naomi smiled at her phone during dinner now. She came home energized instead of exhausted, talking about housing pilots and a man who had a real gift for organizing people. She hadn't looked that unguarded around Isaiah in a decade. "Who is this guy again?" Isaiah asked one evening, swirling wine he wasn't drinking. "Marcus Reed. Runs outreach for the foundation now. Lost an auto shop to a business partner who swindled him. He's brilliant with people. 2 housing partnerships lined up and he's been on staff a month." "You seem pretty impressed." Something flickered across her face and smoothed over fast. "He's good at his job." Isaiah let it go that night, but he didn't forget it. Over the following weeks, he searched Marcus's name, the bankruptcy, old local stories about a business that collapsed under murky circumstances, the fact that Marcus and Naomi grew up 3 blocks apart on the south side, 20 years before Isaiah existed in her life. He said nothing to her. He just got quieter, colder, worked later, told himself it was business as usual, while something old and uneasy took root behind his ribs. That was around when Calvin Price started paying attention. Calvin ran his affairs from a glass office on LaSalle Street, 40 floors up, under the name Meridian Capital Partners. Nobody who did business with him knew about Reed Auto Restoration or the 2 other companies he'd quietly dismantled through forged paperwork over 15 years. To Chicago, Calvin Price was a respected turnaround specialist. In truth, he'd built his fortune finding people who trusted easily, getting close and taking what they'd built. His assistant showed him a photo, Naomi Brooks with her new outreach director. Calvin's coffee sat forgotten in his hand. He remembered that name. He remembered exactly how many years he'd spent making sure Marcus Reed would never have the money or standing to look too closely at what happened to his shop. A homeless man asks no questions. A homeless man working for one of the most powerful women in Chicago was a different problem entirely. Calvin made calls to a reporter who owed him, an old associate with access to court records, a PR contact who called himself a narrative specialist. Within 2 weeks, an anonymous tip landed at a Chicago business blog. Naomi Brooks's new outreach director had a troubling and unexplained financial history, including a bankruptcy connected to allegations unproven of financial mismanagement. The story didn't need to say Marcus did anything wrong, it just needed the word allegations next to his name. By Friday, 2 more outlets had it. By Monday, board members were quietly asking Naomi whether it was wise to keep a man with financial red flags representing the foundation publicly. Marcus found out at 6 in the morning, scrolling his phone, watching his own name trend for reasons that turned his stomach. "They're saying I stole from my own company," he said when Naomi got to his office an hour later, his voice flat with disbelief. 20 years, and somebody finally makes it official. Calvin gets to keep everything and make me look like the criminal too. "We don't know it's Calvin." "I know it's Calvin." His hands were shaking, the first time she'd ever seen him afraid, not of hunger or cold, but of losing the one chance he'd let himself believe in. This is exactly how he works. He doesn't come at you. He makes everyone around you start doubting you until you're standing alone. Naomi took his hand. He let her. "Then you don't stand alone. I don't care what the board thinks. I know who you are, and I'm not walking away from you a second time." Across the city, Calvin poured a second drink and told himself the problem was handled. He had no idea Naomi Brooks did not lose fights she decided to win. Naomi didn't call her bored. She called Denise Whitfield, the sharpest fraud attorney her company retained. I want to know exactly what happened to Reed Auto Restoration. Every document, every signature. Somebody stole that business, and I want to know how. Denise didn't ask why a hotel executive suddenly cared about a defunct auto shop. She opened her laptop and got to work. 11 days later, her team had a paper trail, worse than even Marcus had guessed. The forged partnership agreement giving Calvin 80% had been notarized by a woman named Patricia Voss, whose license had quietly lapsed 8 years earlier and who'd notarized 6 other business documents connected to companies that later collapsed, each one tied to Calvin through a different shell entity. Reached in Arizona, Patricia admitted she'd signed several documents for Calvin over the years without necessarily reading them closely for what she vaguely called consulting fees. That was the first thread, not the last. Meridian Capital Partners, Denise's team found, had acquired controlling stakes in 4 small family businesses over a decade. Always the same pattern: a trusted relationship, a partnership agreement altered after signing, a rapid liquidation into shell companies that funneled money back to Calvin. This isn't one bad year 20 years ago, Denise told Naomi, spreading documents across the table. This is a career. You're Mr. Reed was one of the first. He wasn't the last. Digging through the shell companies used to liquidate Reed Auto Restoration, Denise's team found something else: a holding entity called Kestrel Property Group that had briefly financed a real estate deal for a young developer 12 years earlier. That developer was Isaiah Brooks. Denise brought it to Naomi privately. Isaiah's involvement was minor and legal, a short-term bridge loan through a broker. No sign he'd ever known who was behind Kestrel, but the thread was there. Naomi found Isaiah in his office that night, working blueprints, and set the papers in front of him without a word. "What is this?" He scanned it, and his face changed. Confusion, then recognition, then something heavier. "I remember this deal. Needed fast financing. A broker connected me to Kestrel. Paid it back in 18 months, full interest." He looked up. "You're telling me I did business, even by accident, with the guy who took Marcus's shop?" "The thread exists. I'm not accusing you of anything. I know you didn't know." He sat back, quiet for a while, looking at the papers, not at her. "I could bury this," he finally said, "make some calls. Nobody would ever connect my name to it." He set the papers down. "I'm not going to do that, obviously. Just give me a minute. This is a lot." He picked them back up. "Send Denise everything I have, all of it." Naomi hadn't expected the tears. Isaiah didn't reach for her, that wasn't them anymore, but he didn't look away either, and something between them shifted, quietly, for good. The story broke Wednesday morning, and by Wednesday afternoon, Calvin Price's world was unraveling in real time. The Tribune ran it first. 15 years of forged documents, fraudulent notarizations, and shell companies stripping family businesses from their owners, corroborated by the Illinois Attorney General's office. Marcus Reed's name appeared not as a suspect, But as the first known victim, his forged signature matching documents used in at least 3 other cases tied to Calvin Price. Isaiah's brief, legitimate Kestrel loan got 1 accurate paragraph, a footnote, not a scandal. He took a few uncomfortable calls that week. He answered everyone honestly. By Friday, nobody was asking any more. Calvin was arrested Thursday morning outside his LaSalle Street office, in full view of the financial reporters he'd spent his career cultivating. He didn't go quietly, shouted about persecution, about a billionaire's personal vendetta, but 11 other victims came forward within days, each with paperwork Denise's team had already assembled. Patricia Voss agreed to testify. The case was close to airtight. Marcus sat in Naomi's office watching the coverage on mute, saying almost nothing for a long time. 20 years, he finally said. 20 years telling myself I must have missed something in the fine print, that it was my carelessness. I built a whole identity around being the man who failed his own company. You didn't fail anything, Naomi said. A predator targeted a good man because he knew you were too honest to expect betrayal. That's not a flaw, it's the opposite. He was quiet, then laughed, surprised out of him. Ruthie's gonna be insufferable about being right. About what? She told me 2 years ago the truth would come out and I'd stop carrying guilt that was never mine. He shook his head. I didn't believe her. The civil settlement, once Calvin's remaining assets were seized, gave Marcus back a portion of what the shop had been worth. Not everything, but enough to matter. Reporters who'd written troubling financial history a month earlier now wanted photos with him. One asked outside the courthouse what he planned to do with the money. Buy a house, presumably, after 2 years in a warehouse. Marcus looked straight into the camera. I've spent 2 years with 31 people who had nothing, and every one of them still found a way to share what little they had with somebody who had less. I'm not interested in a house while they're still on cots. I know what I'm building, and it isn't for me. Watching from her office, Naomi felt something settle in her chest. Not surprise. She'd known exactly what he'd say. Certainty. Whatever life had taken from Marcus Reed, it had never once taken who he was. The old warehouse didn't look like much the day the construction crews arrived. Rusted beams, boarded windows, 31 cots still in their careful rows. Marcus stood in the middle of it with blueprints in his hands and something like fire in his eyes. He named it the Reed Brooks Community Center over Naomi's objections. You're funding half of it, he told her, grinning. Your name goes on the building, not negotiable. Neither's mine. 8 months later, it opened. The whole warehouse footprint and then some. Ground floor, a vocational program, 6 workshop bays, Marcus teaching auto mechanics 3 mornings a week, alongside instructors for welding, HVAC, commercial driving, all free to any Chicago resident. Second floor, 42 units of transitional housing, real beds, real locks, up to 18 months while people rebuilt. A food pantry on the ground floor, stocked partly through Naomi's restaurants, open to any family in the neighborhood, no questions asked. Otis Grant landed a job in small engine repair within a month and, 6 weeks later, finally called his daughter in Milwaukee. Dre Simmons enrolled in the center's community college partnership, studying toward engineering, and kept a photo of the old warehouse on his dorm desk. Ruthie refused to leave the transitional floor even after she qualified for her own place. Somebody had to keep an eye on things and nobody argued. Naomi became the center's largest donor, but never once tried to run it. Marcus ran it his way. "You built something extraordinary," she told him at the ribbon cutting. "We built it," he corrected. "I just finally had the money to stop doing it out of a Buick trunk." Around then, quietly, Naomi and Isaiah began ending their marriage. No scandal, no discovery, nothing the tabloids could chew on. Just one honest conversation, both of them finally saying what had been true for years. They respected each other, loved each other, and hadn't been partners walking the same road in a long time. Isaiah had spent months since the Calvin case re-evaluating the deals he chased, the version of success he'd been protecting. "I don't think either of us did anything wrong," he told her. "I think we stopped choosing each other a long time ago and were too tired to say it." "I think you're right," Naomi said, grief and relief tangled together. The divorce, when it went public, was handled with more dignity than Chicago expected. A brief joint statement, a request for privacy. Isaiah stepped back from his bigger development deals and started putting his energy into affordable housing on the South Side, work he told a reporter he should have been doing all along. When Naomi ran into him nearly a year later at a mutual friends event, he asked genuine questions about the center and told her, without bitterness, that she looked happier than he'd seen her in a decade. "I think I finally am," she said, and meant it. 7 months after the divorce, Naomi stood in the doorway of the community center's workshop bay on a quiet Tuesday, watching Marcus close up. She'd told herself she was checking the quarterly numbers. She'd already read them twice that morning. The truth was simpler. She liked being near him, always had, even at 17, even now at 42, in a room that smelled like motor oil and fresh paint. "You're staring," Marcus said, not turning around, evaluating the foundation's investment. "Uh-huh." He turned, a smile that reached his eyes now instead of stopping short. "Investment's looking good tonight," she laughed. "That you flirting with me, Marcus Reed?" "Been a while. Tell me if I'm rusty." They fell into an easy rhythm after that. No fireworks, no sweeping declaration, both of them old enough to know real second chances weren't built that way. Dinners at a diner on Cicero Avenue that reminded Marcus of the shop. Slow walks along the lakefront, filling in 23 years a little at a time. "I'm not the girl who made you that bracelet," Naomi told him one evening on a bench overlooking the water, the sun going down gold over the lake. "I stayed in a marriage longer than I should have because it was easier than admitting it was over. I let my mother's fear become mine for longer than I want to say." "I'm not the boy who used to walk you home either," Marcus said. "I've got more scars now. Some days the anger about what Calvin took still catches me off guard. I flinch when good things happen, waiting for the other shoe." "So, what does that leave us?" He thought about it. 2 people who got broken and put themselves back together a little different. I don't need the girl from the Cavalier hood. I'm interested in this, right now, whoever we've actually become. "I think," Naomi said, "I'd like that too." They didn't rush toward anything. Naomi kept running her company. Marcus kept running the center, which within its first year had graduated over 200 residents into stable jobs and opened a second transitional building 3 blocks over. On the center's 1-year anniversary, Naomi stood beside him at a small gathering on the workshop floor, folding chairs, paper cups of lemonade, the same battery lanterns Marcus had once used to feed 31 people out of a Buick, kept by the entrance as a reminder of where it started. Ruthie gave a short speech that had half the room wiping their eyes about a man who never ate until everyone else had. Dre, home from his second year of engineering school, hugged Marcus hard enough to nearly knock him over and told the room Marcus was the reason he believed anything was still possible. When it was Marcus's turn to speak, he kept it simple. 2 years ago, I was a man nobody wanted at the door, he said, looking over the room, former warehouse residents standing next to board members and reporters who'd once called his history troubling, all of them just neighbors now. I lost everything once because I trusted the wrong person. It would have been easy to decide I should never trust anyone again. Some days it still is. He looked at Naomi. But I got a second chance, not because I deserved it more than anybody in this room. Every one of you fought just as hard for yours. I got it because somebody decided I was worth believing in again, right when I'd mostly stopped believing in myself. That's what this place is. Not charity, just what happens when people decide to believe each other back to life. He raised his paper cup, a little self-conscious, to second chances and to everybody in this room brave enough to take one. The room raised their cups together. Naomi, watching the man she'd loved as a teenager and lost, then found again as a woman who finally understood what love actually required, felt something settle that had been unsettled for 23 years. Later, after the chairs were stacked and the lanterns off, Marcus walked her out to her car the way he used to walk her home from school, unhurried, in no rush to say goodbye. "You ever think about how different things might have gone?" Naomi asked, "if my mother had just given you that letter?" Marcus looked up at the stars starting to show over the roofline. "All the time. But I don't know if I'd trade it. Losing each other, losing everything else, finding our way back. I think it's part of what made us who we are. That boy in the Cavalier didn't know yet what it cost to lose something. I do." She reached for his hand, the same hand that still, 23 years later, wore a faded leather bracelet a 17-year-old girl had braided from a library book because she couldn't afford anything better. "Well," she said softly, "I'm glad we finally found our way back, however long it took." 23 years. Marcus pulled her gently closer under the streetlight. "I'd wait 23 more if I had to. Glad I don't." Above them, the Chicago skyline glittered on, indifferent to two people who'd lost everything and built it all back, not the same as before, but stronger and finally, truly, their own. Some love stories end where they started. This one simply began again, exactly where it was always supposed to. Do you think Naomi did the right thing by giving Marcus a second chance? Tell us in the comments, and if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our next emotional story.